Hello, everyone. Right, I have now finished all of the content screencasts or YouTubes, and I want to go into a bit more of the skills that you are going to need for your final exam. So, I've done these with a couple of classes recently, and they have kind of worked. So I'm hoping it's going to work here. But um, I want to introduce you to what's called the discuss research question. So often you're asked to discuss studies, or you're asked to discuss theories or treatments, but occasionally you're asked to discuss research. And I want to just show you this example just here. This comes up quite often in eyewitness testimony, in memory, and it's got a stem there about, I'm not going to read it out. You can pause it if you want to, but it's got a stem about a violent incident in a pub, or I don't know, bar or something. And the police officer says, "Did you see a knife?" Leading questions. The woman says, "Yes, but I've talked about it so much." Post-event discussion. She said, "I was really scared at the time, anxiety." But the question in this case, and have a look at this one here. Discuss research into two or more factors that affect the reliability of eyewitness testimony. Now, this discuss research, students are notoriously not great at this question. So essentially what you need to do here is you need to talk about, briefly, pieces of research within this field and link it to the theory. Now, you're talking about theory and research here. So, for example, I would want to talk about the theory of leading questions, but then also make a brief link to Loftus and Palmer, for example. Now, I do actually have a model answer just here, same question. I've got an AO1 here, an AO2 here, and then two AO3s here. This is on the Google site if you have access to it. But I just want to go through what kind of thing you actually have to put in your AO1. So just a reminder here, discuss research into two or more factors. Now, you're talking about leading questions, post-event discussion, and anxiety, but you need to be talking about research linked to those as well. So as you can see here, I talk about Loftus and I talk about leading questions, sorry. I say leading questions have been shown to have a direct impact on the integrity of the memory, distorting it to a memory that may not be entirely accurate. And then I bring in the AO1 research linked to that, which in this case was Loftus and Palmer. I then have to repeat that again for anxiety. So I talk about the Yerkes-Dodson hypothesis of anxiety, denotes that high and low anxiety promotes poorer recall, with moderate anxiety improving recall. And then I talk about a piece of research here and include some stats. Now, in this AO1, I've got two pieces of research, simply what they found, not their whole frigging life story, not where Elizabeth Loftus was born or where she did a postdoctorate or anything like that. I just stick to the findings, and then I have two references to the theories as well. Now, this is a pretty short AO1. Maybe I could have elaborated out, but this is what we're talking about when it comes to discuss research questions. Now, because there is a STEM, obviously then in the red ink, we would then apply this to the STEM. Now, I'm not going to go into this. This is not really what this video is about. But hopefully we know by now how to actually apply. What I want to get onto, and just a reminder, you've got your outline of research and linking it to theory in your AO1. In your AO2, and I cannot express how important this is, your AO2, you are evaluating the research as a whole. You're not evaluating specific pieces of research. So I will, I would not, I've lost my train of thought now. I wouldn't evaluate Loftus and Palmer. I wouldn't evaluate Johnson and Scott. I wouldn't evaluate Gabbert, for example. In this case, you're evaluating research as a whole and using those specific pieces of research as evidence. So that is pretty. And for example, right, if you have a look at this point just here, I tell you what, actually, this point is a bit better. right? This point down here, despite these beneficial applications, that's me linking it back to the previous point, despite these beneficial applications, the studies can be questioned on their reliance of American students. Now, I've not mentioned Loftus and Palmer, I've not mentioned Johnson Scott. I'm talking about the research as a whole here, and all I'm going to do is use Loftus and Palmer as evidence for my point. That is how you do these points. Now, students do not do well with these questions. The main reason is they do not like this discuss research. When we're talking about discuss research, we're talking about research as a whole. We're talking about research. You're not evaluating Johnson and Scott. You're not evaluating Loftus and Palmer. You're evaluating the field as a whole. Now, that's fine. Hopefully you get that and understand that. But if you don't, I would have a look at this question on the Google site, if you've got access to it. But fine. This question comes up all the time. One of the most important things to note down, these types of questions will occur in parts of the spec where there's loads of little itty bitty pieces of research. And I've gone away and I've had to think about where they've come up before. And these are genuine questions that have come up. So this one here, we know, right? Another one to think about here, discuss research into caregiver-infant interactions. So you need to know at least, I would argue, 3 or 4 pieces of research, not the whole thing, but 3 or 4 pieces of research, the results of what was found. So, for example, inside caregiver-infant interactions is the role of the father. Now, the role of the father, you've got Brown, et al., Belsky, Hurdy, Geiger, Lamb, Frody. You've, to an extent, got Schaffer and Emerson as well. Now, you don't need to know those 7 pieces of research, but know 4 of them. I definitely would know at least 4 of them, because you cannot answer this question without referring to research. So, for example, how would I approach that question? I would say the role of the father is quite inconsistent. On the one hand, theories believe that mothers and fathers can be equal parents. For example, Frody, and then tell you what Frody said. And then I'd say, on the other hand, pieces of research such as Geiger found that there are differences. And for example, Geiger found that fathers are gone to in a more positive mood, mothers are gone to in a more negative emotional mood, for example. This one is a great example about how you can get caught out. Discuss research into cultural variations. Now, the vast majority of students can only talk about Van Eisendorn, but you cannot. The question did not ask you discuss Van Eisendorn. The question asked you to discuss research into cultural variations. So talk about Van Eisendorn, but you absolutely have to talk about at least Takahashi and Simonelli. Look at my slides if you don't know where they are, or they hopefully will be in the comments box. If not, then comment on the video. But for here, I would want you outlining Takahashi, Simonelli, and Van Eisendorn, 3 separate pieces of research, and then evaluating not Simonelli, Takahashi, or Van Eisendorn. I would want you evaluating research as a whole. For example, pieces of research in this field do not tend to look at the whole world and in fact just select individual cultures. For example, Van Eisendorn only looked at 8 cultures which cannot truly represent the whole world. So I'm using Van Eisendorn as evidence for my point, which is a bit more general. Now, a few others that I think might come up quite a lot. This one I'm particularly worried about because I don't think students revise this particularly well. And it has come up 3 times, apparently. I think twice as a 16 marker, once as an 8 marker. Discuss research into the influence of early attachment on adult relationships. So you need to know Hazan and Shaver, but you need to go beyond that as well. You need to go beyond that. So what I would do is I would go to whatever resources you have, right? Let's have a look. I've not planned this. I'd go to whatever resources you have. I would have a look through the slides, and I would look to see. Should have planned this really. Right, what have I got? I've got the theories, I've got internal working model, and I've got continuity hypothesis. But then I've also got Kearns, as you can see on the top there, Myron, Wilson, and Smith, as you can see below. That, I should say, those are for early attachments on childhood relationships. What I've got for early attachment influence on adult relationships is Hazan and Shaver mainly, and Bailey et al. I think I've also got a quote from Bailey et al. Was there. If you want to pause the video, write that down, do so. But I've also got a banging quote, thank you very much, from Dale 2019, quite a recent piece of research, which I think is a brilliant quote to know. And I would absolutely drop that in the AO1. Now, again, that's a tough question. It's come up quite a lot. Students don't like these difficult questions and they stick their head in the sand. You need to know how to answer that question. Kern, Myron Wilson, and Smith, whatever it was, Hazan and Shaver, Dale 2019, and Bailey et al. Right? Again, know all of those pieces of research before finally this one just here. Again, students only know Sperry, and they don't even know that well. Discuss what research has shown about the localization of function in the brain. Sperry looked technically at lateralization of the brain, but you need to know a couple of pieces of research here. McGuire is quite a good piece of research. McGuire is a particularly good piece of research to use. So make sure you look at McGuire et al. 2000 about the London taxi drivers, but you also need to know another couple of pieces of research as well. So I guess my main warning, those parts of the spec whereby you are required to know a lot of different pieces of research, be prepared to have these discuss research questions. And by the way, discuss research is not just outline the theories. You have to talk about the theories, linking it to specific pieces of research. So off the top of my head, if I were just to have a look at this, one area I think that is prime for this, and you may or may not do this, although we do this at my college, schizophrenia. That first bullet point of schizophrenia is absolutely prime territory for this, because you need to know Copeland, Rosenhan. I mean, there are too many to remember off the top of my head. It's been a long time since I taught it, but I would know at least 4 pieces of research from this bullet point. It's probably the same for other ones, to be fair. Relationships, there's quite a few pieces of research. What happens if it comes up? I don't know. Discuss. Oh, I don't know if it will. I tell you what. Discuss research into factors affecting attraction in romantic relationships. Could you answer that question? So there's a lot here. There is a lot here to think about. Discuss research questions are incredibly common. I think that was it. You are going to get asked a lot of these. So my advice is for those bullet points whereby you need loads of different pieces of research, know at least 3 or 4 of those that you can outline and then evaluate generally. But remember, in your AO1, you strictly need the theory you're talking about and linking it to a specific piece of research. So your research goes in your AO1. Just one final thing on this, by the way, when it comes to evaluating these points. So for example, on this one here, we've got discuss research into factors. I've gone for Loftus and Palmer. I've gone for anxiety. I've gone for Johnson and Scott. When it comes down to your evaluations, students sometimes say an advantage of this research is that it's backed up by research. That's not answering the question. The research is in the AO1, right? So whatever you're talking with, avoid that point basically, right? Avoid this whole research support or research refuting, right? You want to evaluate the research as a whole. I don't quite know if I nailed that video going through it, but that is how I would approach discuss research questions. Well, I mean, I would, if I were you, practice these questions. If you want to have a quick look and, I don't know, maybe freeze the screen and have a crack at these questions, then I absolutely would. But these questions are going to come up and you need to be prepared.